So Frozen 2 is explicitly an example of the hero's journey. The hero's journey starts off with the call to adventure. You're supposed to be called to go, and you're supposed to leave the known world, and enter the unknown.
Hello, I'm James Cary, and this is Popcorn Parenting, the conversation with your kids about feature films and family confabulations. I'm joined as ever by self-confessed reformed mythologist, former kids and youth worker, and father of two, Nate Morgan Locke. Hello to you.
Hello to you, James. That's a wonderful alliterative list you put together there. I'm delighted with it.
Oh, good. I'm very pleased. We are going to talk about Frozen 2, so therefore I guess I have to have some cold, hard facts that are so cold and hard that they are actually frozen.
They are also frozen, or as we could say, Frozen 2, yes.
Yes, indeed, they are Frozen 2. So here we go with Frozen 2, released in November 2019, directed by Chris Buck. That's not a reference to the amount of money the movie made, but I shall come on to that quite shortly. He also directed Tarzan in 1999, Surf's Up in 2007. You like Surf's Up, don't you?
It's a hidden treasure.
Yeah.
We will definitely do an episode on Surf's Up because it's genius.
And also a little-known movie he directed called Frozen, as did Jennifer Lee, who was Chief Creative Officer of Walt Disney Animation Studios, and she is a writer-director of the original Frozen movie. Frozen 2, budget $150 million, box office $1.45 billion. It was only the third highest grossing film of 2019, but it is the second highest grossing animated film of all time. And it received a nomination for Best Original Song for Into the Unknown for an Oscar. And it was the sequel to Frozen, released 6 years earlier, which had a budget of $150 million, and the box office of that was $1.28 billion. The third highest grossing animated film of all time. Fun fact, my kids couldn't get past the beginning of the first movie, so this film is dead to us.
Wow. Those are eye-watering figures in terms of the amount of money.
Those are eye-watering figures, aren't they? And I'm sorry to focus on the cold, hard cash. To my kids, that's what it seems like. And to us as a family, that's what it seems like. And I should probably just explain to the listeners. So I have two very happy little daughters, the oldest of whom particularly just loves us being together as a family. She's a real home bird, cozy girl.
Yeah.
And so what happens at the beginning of the first Frozen movie, Nate?
But just to say, we are going to do some spoilers, we should sound the spoiler alert.
And also the money, the fact that 1.4 billion people, for $1.4 billion has been taken in the box office of the second movie would suggest that most of humanity have seen the movie except me and my family.
Well, this may be true.
Because at the beginning of the first movie, what happens?
Well, the family is ripped apart by a tragedy at sea. And
parents die, sisters separated.
Yes.
My daughter cannot think of anything worse. That is literally the ultimate horror movie for a 6-year-old daughter of mine when she was 6 at the time. Yeah. So there were only tears, and the movie got turned off, and that was the end of that.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's worth saying this is popcorn parenting, and you need to know your kids, right? You've got to know, if you've got a very sensitive soul, then clearly the sorts of movies you're going to want to share with them are going to be different. Yeah. What's tricky, I suppose, with Frozen and having daughters is clearly the fact that it was such a global hit. Yeah. And in some ways a sort of surprising one. I mean, I know the budget is by no means insignificant for the first film, but I don't think anyone was really prepared for this absolute tidal wave of popular support for the film and the way that it just grabbed hold of everything. Frozen 2 are films essentially based upon the story written by Hans Christian Andersen back in the 19th century called The Snow Queen. That was the sort of the fundamental narrative. which I suppose Disney jumped off it because, there are only some similarities in terms of what happens, what characters there are, and all that sort of stuff. It is definitely worth checking out the original fairy tale, because in that fairy tale, the Lord's Prayer is used by a character as a sort of key to unlock some sort of hidden world, to access something. And the concluding line is Jesus's words, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." Or I think it's, "Unless you become like one of these, you shall not inherit the kingdom of heaven." So Hans Christian Andersen's clearly got some very explicit Christian content in there.
Yeah. And it doesn't make it into the Disney movie. Wow, that's
somehow
amazing.
It didn't make it in. But it's also worth noting that part of the reason for Frozen being such a success is the songs, which are written by the husband and wife team of Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez. So they write musicals, Broadway shows, all sorts of stuff. And Robert Lopez is one of the only EGOTs in the world. So he's won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony.
Wow. So
you're talking about someone whose ability to match lyrics and melody is just profound, and to do it with humour and to do it with
That's a great pub quiz question, isn't it? The number of people who have EGOTs.
There are some songs that they wrote for the musical or for the films which did get edited out. So there's one particularly in Frozen 1 which is a kind of basically a two-finger salute to the classic Disney princess idea.
Right.
And I think Disney just sort of felt it was a bit on the nose and a bit unnecessary, because clearly Frozen is fairly revolutionary in terms of reimagining the personality and character of a Disney princess. They're very active. They're not passive recipients. There's a sense in which Frozen, because its central message is one of sorority. Yeah. These two sisters and their relationship is actually the most important thing. Yeah. So even though, yes, the parents are sort of lost at the start of Frozen, the first film, it is the sisters' bond which is the kind of the thing which must be protected above all else. And that continues into the second film. So the second film really is about Anna and Elsa's relationship and how that is sort of protected and develops over the course of A Wonderful Narrative.
So we're going to speak specifically about Frozen 2. Frozen 1's probably been done to death. Also, I get the sense from you, it's not as interesting a movie in some ways.
I don't think it is, mythologically speaking. Frozen 2 is essentially the sort of mythological backstory to Frozen 1.
Yeah.
So you get much more interesting things going on to say, okay, so why is Arendelle the way that it is? Frozen 2 could easily be thought to be another weapon in the social justice war. So you could watch Frozen 2 and you could say, well, really what this is about is post-colonial guilt and a sort of feminist supremacy. They're the two things that you could sort of say on a basic level. That's what the film's about. So the grandfather of Anna and Elsa, King Runard, I think is his name, has built a dam for the Northuldra people. So it's a tribe that live out in the woods to the north of Arendelle, which is the kingdom. And so he goes and builds this dam for the people. And at the act of dedication, he performs a most treacherous act by effectively trying to massacre the Northuldra. And that is a secret which has never been shared before in the world of Arendelle. It's one that Anna and Elsa have no idea about. And that through the process of the film, the great sort of reveal is that it wasn't the Northuldra who attacked the Arendellians. It was the Arendellians who betrayed the trust of the Northuldra. And it's that reason that the place of the Northuldra has become this enchanted forest into which no one can enter and from which no one can leave. So you could sort of say, well, really, what's going on a plot level is that this is about post-colonial guilt. This is basically about Western people coming to discover their brutal, bloodthirsty past.
Yeah.
And so it's really just trying to convince you that, boo to Western civilization.
Yeah. If you weren't already ashamed of the fact that Britain had an empire, then you should be by now.
Yeah. So now in the world of the film, this is clearly true. Right, so you have to take the film on its own merits. So Frozen 2 does tell that story, and that is what happened. But in the process of the film, essentially, Anna and Elsa go through to try to discover what's in this enchanted forest, try and discover what went wrong with the relationship between the Northuldra and the Arundelians. They're sort of white saviors in a way, because they do then go back to resolve the Great Crisis.
Yeah.
And marvelously, as happened with a few Disney films recently, the means by which the collective is either absolved of its guilt or its collective sin is dealt with is by the desperately self-centered act of a woman.
Right.
So if you look at Moana would be another example of this. So Moana's on an island and she looks out where there's a line where what's the line of the song? There's a line where the sky meets the sea, it calls me, says Moana. Right? So she's desperate to get off this island, but a terrible patriarchal father says, no one must leave this island. The island's falling apart, it's under a curse. She's like, no, I really want it. I feel like I have to go and do this thing, right?
You get that in the Horrible Histories movie too.
Yeah, so you get all this thing about, right, a Disney princess who wants to leave behind this terrible domestic, boring, suburban, whatever world that she lives in. She wants to leave her responsibility and go to the other world. Same is true in Little Mermaid as well. But in the newer films, so Frozen 2 being an example, by following that yearning desire to go out into the unknown, literally that's one of the songs, one of the names of the hits in Frozen 2, that's the means by which we will secure all sorts of peace.
Okay.
Not by an act of self-sacrifice, but by an act of self-expression and self-actualization.
Self-love.
As I say, with Frozen 2, you could say, okay, post-colonial guilt and feminist supremacy, that's really what the film wants you to do. And so anyone on the right of politics should be like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. And anyone on the left should be like, yay, this is hilarious and brilliant and charming, right?
Yeah.
But I think that actually misses the deeper sort of mythological, theological questions that ought to be asked of a film like this. So you can have that discussion and that's fine. And maybe that's the conversation you want to have with your kids. Maybe you do want to talk to them about the histories of the nations that you're part of, what that looks like. That's a good conversation to have. But I think much more interesting is this. Well, there's two things I want to talk about. The first one is to do with the self-fulfillment angle.
Yeah.
And the second one is to do with what's presented in the films as the four elemental spirits. This is the book that everyone has to get hold of. You see that? Joseph Campbell,
okay,
The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The reason why that book is so significant, Joseph Campbell essentially wrote in the first half of the 20th century, and he's writing about Jungian psychoanalysis. So,
okay,
Carl,
stay with us, everyone. Stay with us.
Okay, come on. Everyone's fine to do this.
Yeah.
We've been dumbing down for too long, James. You said the same thing.
I agree.
Carl Jung believed that there was a collective unconscious deep down in each of us. We were sort of all connected to something. It was very unknown, but there were these sort of archetypal characters and figures within some collective history.
Yeah.
And what he was discovering through his sort of theories of psychoanalysis was that this had been expressed in the mythologies and religions of the world and the cults of the world throughout world history. And then Joseph Campbell comes along doing his comparative mythology with a strong Jungian kind of archetypal understanding and says, look, this is really what everything is about. All religion is about coming to the point of self-actualization. It's in the face of chaos, in the face of the fact the world makes no sense, really.
Yeah.
You, as an individual, have to come to a point of discovery, have to become who you sort of desire to be and who you wish to be. Now, what's interesting with...
Because at that moment, you know, Reformed and conservative Christians are going, whoa, 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 this sounds like some kind of pantheism. This is some great, you know, some great one world, join hands religion. You're not saying that, are you? Are you? Are you?
No, I'm literally just telling you what he says. So this is, you know, all in
quotes
for what Campbell is saying. But what is interesting is the influence that Campbell's had on Hollywood screenwriting. Campbell sort of outlines something that he says you can find the monomyth, which is a term from James Joyce. He says you find this single myth story. This shape is there in all the world mythologies. And I've broken it down into a sort of basic formula. And he calls this basic formula the hero's journey. What made that really popular was the fact that George Lucas used it as the self-conscious blueprint for Star Wars.
Right.
So Star Wars was tapping into what had been seen in lots of other realms. So the idea of an Obi-Wan, the idea of a C-3PO, the idea of Han Solo, Luke and Leia, and the way that we face Darth Vader and how this is connected to our, you know, families. And spoiler alert, he is his father. That's what George Lucas was popularizing in clearly the most successful film franchise of all time.
I also heard it was based on Seven Samurai, but, you know.
Yes, so it's got a...
I mean, there is a mythology to the mythology of Star Wars, isn't there?
Yeah. So as reformed mythologists, I think we would want to sort of agree.
Yeah.
There's a sort of what you call a formal agreement, okay? In the way that a broken clock is right twice a day, it's like, yeah, good one. There is a sort of story that seems to keep recurring.
Yeah.
Wonder why that is.
Yeah, it's some kind of existential source code, isn't it? It is firmware for the universe.
Yes.
And we shouldn't be surprised if when you join it up and select it in bold, it turns out to be Christian.
Yeah. And I think that's where, for those of us who are interested in watching these films with our children, for us to be able to say the stories that these, you know, are being promoted can be embraced. Because, of course, they can only be based upon something that's been created by God. So there's the line I love to quote from David as he dedicates the resources for the temple, in which he prays, all things come from you, O God, and of your own have we given you. So we can never come up with anything original. Our thoughts, use a good phrase I quite like, we think God's thoughts after him.
Yeah.
And of course, we get them wrong, and we sort of distort them. So there is that. So Frozen 2 is explicitly an example of the hero's journey. The hero's journey starts off with the call to adventure. You're supposed to be called to go, and you're supposed to leave the known world, and enter the unknown. And the sort of opening song, or the opening sort of message in Frozen is that in Frozen 2 is that Elsa hears this sort of siren call, which from whence she know not where, okay? And she's like, oh, I feel called, I have to sort of, and then she sort of tries to refuse the call, which again is picked up in Campbell's in Campbell's book. And she can't help. Eventually she must, I must go, I must follow this sort of quest. And the opening song, or
it's like the Call of Moses, you know.
Yeah, it is.
Call of Moses, Call of Gideon.
Unknown. Yeah, so you've got to go, you have to go into the unknown. It's an interesting thing, I think, with one of the big things, all is found. When all is lost, all is found is a lullaby that Elsa's mother sings to the two girls. And it's a beautiful piece of music. It's just a beautiful song to sing, and it's incredibly arresting and sort of challenging, I think, for us as Christians to think, okay, what are the songs that we can sing to our children to reassure them in the face of their fears, which have a sort of a quality to them other than just, trust and obey, for there's no other way. Which whilst the message
Jesus
is great,
loves me, this I know,
it's just... Yeah. And that works, like for a very young child, that sort of works. But once you've got children who are sort of 8, 9, 10, up into the tweens, okay, what are the songs that they can sing that aren't, the super excitable, joyful songs? There might be some out there, I don't know. Yeah. But which have this kind of resonance to them.
If there are some out there, they're not working, because it is the most anxious generation. That's the levels of anxiety and fear amongst teens and people in their early 20s is off the charts. So clearly, whatever we've got isn't working.
It was just struck me that she's singing a song to her daughters about where the north wind meets the sea. There's a river full of memories. Sleep, my darling, safe and sound. When all is lost, all is found. And essentially, Honor and Elsa's mother is reassuring them that there is a mythological path in which you can rest. The problem is, this is really the journey that Elsa's going to have to take herself. Whereas I think what we want to do as Christian parents, we're going to want to say, no, this is the path that Christ has walked for us. And that's the grounds for our assurance and why we don't need to fear.
But that, in a way, that sounds limited, because it's just like, therefore your path is already determined, and you just need to be a good Christian. But actually, it's exciting to think, what will that path look like for you, for a 12-year-old girl who in 2020 who is good at the following things, has a passion about this, doesn't like that, and what your path in Christ will be is actually. Yeah. An exciting thing to think about, rather than just keep your head down and trust Jesus and obey. Yeah, it is partly that, but actually, I think we can probably do more there, can't we?
I think we can. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to follow Frozen 2 into its understanding of the elemental spirits of the world. So it's a fairly tried and tested idea that there are these elemental spirits, earth, wind, fire, water. We get them here in Frozen 2, and we get them in Captain Planet. Did you ever see Captain Planet? It was an early 90s sort of eco-propaganda cartoon. And when all the 4 spirits sort of united the children, then Captain Planet came out and was like... And it was one of those classic cartoons where at the end, now remember, children, it's really important for you to recycle, because if you don't, the whales will die. Yeah. Now, in Frozen 2, we've got these 4 elemental forces, earth, wind, water, and fire, and we are told early on in the film that there is a 5th spirit, or is a 5th sort of unifying spirit, and what is that going to be? So off goes... Elsa to go and sort of...
Is it 5G?
No, you'd be surprised.
So that the other 4 could actually talk to each other properly and really crystal clear sound.
That's it, high definition. The 5th element is Elsa herself.
Oh.
I know that's a big spoiler, but she is the high governess of the 4 elemental spirits. She is, if you like, the Gaia. She is the mother goddess who unites and controls and tames the fire gecko, the water stallion, the rock monsters. I think she'd know that
by now.
And she discovers this, and her mother basically tells her this in this ice fortress where the north wind meets the sea, right? She goes up there and she finds out not only that her grandfather was a terrible colonial masochist, but she's discovered that she's the centre of the universe.
Oh, wow. That really takes the biscuit, doesn't it?
This is it. This is the sort of... It's not feminist supremacy. It's human supremacy. This is the most profoundly arrogant thing that anyone can say. It's like, Earth,
but they're saying
wind.
it's her, not all people are this.
No,
just her.
Just her, right?
But in a way, being charitable, we could say, well, Jesus is the fifth thing, that he has the power over the wind and the waves and the sick, and he is the fifth horseman of the apocalypse.
Yes, I think, a fifth horseman of the apocalypse could be tricky, but
but do you know what I mean?
He can ride the horses,
We're frightened of those four things, and actually he is in charge of those four things.
But I think, so he's in charge of them, but in terms of the doctrine of creation, these are things which have been under his governance for eternity, since their creation.
Yeah.
So since God created them, he has had control over them. And he did put mankind to tend the garden and to be to rule over these things. So I suppose you could say that Elsa is returning to some lapsarian, before the fall. There she is, and this is what human beings are supposed to be, right? Which is kind of cool, but it's just interesting that within the context of a Disney audience, what's really being communicated to our kids is, you are the center of the universe.
Wow.
So it's quite funny. There's a YouTube channel, How It Should Have Ended. Have you ever seen this?
No.
It's absolutely brilliant. They just deconstruct most sort of films in a very, very funny way, recreate lots of the scenes. And there's a brilliant one.
Wind, fire, water, earth, what's this all about? A place in the middle, what does it mean? The fifth spirit must be me. What?
Elsa? What are you doing?
Mother, I'm trying to become who I'm supposed to be.
But you already discovered who you're supposed to be.
Yes, but now I'm supposed to be the fifth spirit. Wind, fire, water, earth, and ice.
How is ice the fifth spirit?
Because it's my power, so I just assumed that was it.
Elsa, your power is making ice. If anything, you're a form of the water spirit. The fifth spirit is love.
Okay.
And who do you know that has that power?
Me?
Not everything has to be about you, Elsa.
And it's just brilliant. It's just absolutely awesome.
Okay, so we are way over time.
Oh, wait.
And
no.
although we're not going to hand a transcript of this to our kids for them to read after the movie, or for parents to read out to their kids, how this is all great. I've found this really, really interesting, by the way. So please be affirmed, brother. But give us a couple of questions, or a question that we can ask once we've watched the movie.
Okay, so here we go. This is one of my favourite songs is called Lost in the Woods, which is just this absolutely brilliant 80s power ballad of a song, which they really just, it's hilarious the way that they show you this. And one character is looking for another character, and he's sort of, saying, I know you're my true north, because now I'm lost in the woods, right? You're my only landmark. When you're not there, I don't know where to go, okay? And so I was having a chat with my daughter about this and just saying, that song is so funny, isn't it? So brilliant. It's like, you're my true north. I was like, Lily, who do you think your true north is? She's like, I don't think I've got a true north or something. He's like, so I then thought, well, here's the way in. Who is Christoph looking for? And she's like, well, he's looking for Anna. And I was like, and who's Anna looking for? She's like, well, Anna's looking for Elsa. It's like, well, who's Elsa looking for? Elsa's looking to become the elemental center of the universe. So what's actually quite tragic about the Frozen films and the Frozen is you just have this sort of series, this chain of unrequited love. Where Elsa heads off to become this majestic, glorious, supreme being. Anna, her sister, whose true love for her sister is the solution to in the first film, is looking for her, but it's being sort of rejected. No, I have to go and do this alone. You don't have ice powers like I've got. And then you've got the Christoph who throughout the entire film is trying to ask his beloved to marry him. And just interesting to think who's looking for whom, and they keep sort of running away from each other in a sense.
Yeah.
And so Lily and I were chatting, and we came up with our own little song, which was Christoph's looking for Anna.
Anna's looking for Elsa. Elsa's looking for
probably Jesus, and
Jesus is looking for me.
Great.
And so what we then looked at together, we looked at this brilliant thing that Jesus says, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So that's the great reassurance, is that we are being pursued by Christ in the gospel. God is coming after us to find us, and will rejoice when he finds us, because we are, as Christoph says, we're lost in the woods. But we're not lost in the woods trying to find it out if where Anna's gone. We're lost in the woods, and the great shepherd has come to find his sheep. And that for us became a little moment of joy to just share together. But other songs can be written, I'm sure, but that was just for us quite a tender moment when we. So
it's asking your kids, who are they looking for and what are they finding, and yeah, okay. I mean, I'm interested to get feedback from people on how their discussions went.
I'm sure they will.
But that was a really interesting discursive chat that was very useful, and I think really gets into that engine room of the story and the monomyth, and so that was great. We should probably knock it on the head there. So we will speak to you next time. There'll be more movies. There are always movies.
So many.
And we're not going to spoil it by telling you which one's coming next. Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, James.
Speak to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and that box office figure is only really a box office figure. I don't think we're including lunch boxes in that.
No,
you know what I mean?
Asterisk,
and
lunchbox is not included,
Yeah. I think, sing-along, spin-off.
Well, they did have a lot of... I mean, we've got frozen peas, frozen pizza,
right,
frozen fish fingers. Every time I'm going to do... I think dad jokes have to be some sort of regular feature in a show about parenting, but from two dads. But